Welcome to Vision in Action Live. Good morning. I'm Jim Boswell. I'm your host, and I'm the author of Lifelong Fulfillment, Take Charge of Your Life. On the Vision in Action podcast, we focus on the expert knowledge and solutions that it takes to work on individual personal development. These are the puzzle pieces that allow you to construct the complete picture of your best life. And to do this, we bring you representative experts from every conceivable discipline that can inform your thinking about your own journey to lifelong fulfillment. So, once again, welcome. Let's see what's in store for today's episode. So, today we have a discussion with Catharine Jansen and Chris Pratt. Catharine Jansen is a retired critical care nurse and a certified holistic cancer care coach. She's also an author of a book and a podcaster on the Cancer Care Roundup. She's actually also an inventor, in a sense, as the designer of BRCA shirts that improve postoperative health care in terms of safety and mobility. Now, Mr. Pratt, Chris, is an educator and consultant, and now a certified functional nutritionist and podcaster, doing natural health education as the founder of the Plant Adventure and the Healing Conspiracy podcast. He leads the effort to rally those who want to fight chronic illness with natural methods and to reverse unsolved health problems. Welcome today, Ms. Jansen and Mr. Pratt. Glad to have you on Vision in Action Live.
Thank you.
Great. So moving forward, as you know, at Vision in Action, one of the challenges of being human is our inevitable encounters with the speed bumps of life, things like marriage, relocation, death, illness, failures, and recoveries. So today, our spotlight is going to be on cancer, the big C, and the alternatives that are available to us to survive and triumph over this scourge. Now, as we go through this, listeners are invited to jot down questions, and I will give you an email to send those to in case we don't answer those during the course of this discussion. Send them on, we'll get our experts to comment, and we'll get the answers back to you. So to start out, it might be good to have a benchmark on where this particular part of healthcare stands. So I'm going to quote you some statistics from National Institutes of Health, Mayo Clinic, etc., to give you some idea about what's going on. So in 2024, an estimated 2 million people will come down with some form of cancer. And this is in the United States. All the statistics I'm telling you are US statistics. And of those 2 million, that same year, about 612,000 will expire from the disease. So that's a rough survival rate of about 70% if you want to look at it that way. If we look at when it occurs by age, in general, the vast majority of it is between 60 years old and 85. However, you really can't ignore that because cancer does occur as early as 1 year old and also as late as 59, although the incident rate is lower. So it's something that human beings are dealing with and have probably been dealing with for most of our existence, but it's very much in the last 50 years with the National Institutes of Health been a focus in the US. At the Mayo Clinic, they say that risk statistics can be pretty frustrating because you can't really tell your individual risk of cancer. You're dealing with statistics and we don't know what part of the curve you belong in. But to offer something, they say that studies that have found that American men have about a 40% chance of developing cancer in their lifetimes. But that doesn't mean it's 40% if you're a man and if as an individual, because your circumstances will vary. Your diet, your genetics, your epigenetics, and how well you take care of yourself. The National Cancer Institute reminds us that breast, lung, bronchus, prostate, and colorectal cancers account for about 50% of new cancer cases. And the ones that are the most difficult in terms of mortality are lung, bronchitis, colorectal, pancreatic, and breast cancers. So those are pretty common features. We hear about them accidentally, whether we focus on this or not. So that just gives you some sense of where they fit. The Cleveland Clinic would make sure that we understand where the lowest survival rates are. So the most difficult ones to deal with are esophageal, that's the throat, pancreatic cancer, which we all need to survive, liver cancer, and brain cancer. Those are anywhere from 50% to about 30%, 36% of the total. And to sum it all up, the National Cancer Institute reminds us, and these stats, in fact, are from a couple years back in 2022, that 70% of survivors will last over 5 years from diagnosis. That percentage goes down when you hit 10 years, it's down to 48%. And by the time you've reached 20 years after diagnosis and treatment, survival rates are around 20. So these are all horribly depressing statistics, but it helps us to understand why this is of pervasive interest to everyone, regardless of what country they're in. And I'm not trying to separate the United States from the rest of the world, because they are also dealing with it. So those are the updates. And I'd like to give Catharine and Chris a chance to talk about the fact that we all here are cancer survivors and we all have different experiences. And I'd like to give us an opportunity to engage the audience in the fact that, yes, each cancer is an individual different situation. So with that, Catharine, would you like to relay a little bit of your experience?
Thank you very much, Jim, for having me on your show. But I think that for me, my experience was not only with my diagnosis of cancer and the deer in the headlights experience, but it's also the chemo, the radiation, the surgical procedures, and my bout of sepsis. But most important, growing over that and that metamorphosis when we get through, so that we can help others. And that's my joy that I have in life and how I'm healing, because I'm working with people to really to help reduce the risks in establishing healthy lifestyle changes. It's not easy, but you know what? We can do this. That's what it's about.
Okay. Chris, perhaps you have some comments on your path.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. And again, thank you for having me on today. You know, my path has been very non-traditional in a lot of ways. I had a really, and I'm still dealing with it, a really rare form of skin cancer. It started as skin cancer, which was common skin cancer called basal cell carcinoma. And after I had that surgically removed through the standard procedure, the Mohs surgery, about 2 years later, started to have a pain in my neck. And so went to chiropractors, went to dermatologists, ear, nose, and throat doctors. And nobody was sure until they took a biopsy. And they discovered that after that surgery, the cells had metastasized and ended up going through my body and landing in a lymph node in my neck. And so I was in the rare 3% of cases that this happens. And suddenly I was deemed as being in stage 4 metastatic basaloid carcinoma, which is a really fancy way of saying you have skin cancer that went inside your body and took root. So it was very unexpected. You know, after you have your skin cancer surgery, you think, okay, they got it and life goes on. But that being said, it became a very arduous journey, because there isn't a great way to necessarily tackle what I have. My skin cancer internally is not extremely aggressive, thankfully, and it's very contained in a lot of ways. And so the traditional route for me was offering basically one option. They didn't want to do radiation and they didn't want to do surgery. They wanted to give me a chemo pill. They had decided that chemo pill it's the strongest thing on the market for my kind of cancer. And they wanted me to take that for 18 months. And they said after 18 months, they would determine if it was effective. And to me, that was just astonishing that I had to take a chemo for a year and a half without any determination if this is working or not. And then, the oncologist told me that for him, it's working if the cancer doesn't spread, and that I really shouldn't expect to get rid of it. And he said that at some point in this process that the cancer would work its way around this drug, because that's what tends to happen. And then they would have to start over. And, for me, I just kind of sat back and said, we've been tackling cancer for over 100 years. You guys have been working on this, and that's the strongest thing you've got for me right now. Like, that doesn't sound very promising. And unfortunately, the side effects of that pill were very, very heavy and very dangerous. So I had been doing some research into alternative therapies and alternative means of healing cancer. And one thing that I understood that was foundational was, really cancer isn't my problem. My problem is my immune system isn't functioning correctly, because everybody has cancer cells in their body. But in some people, your immune system is malfunctioning. And so therefore it doesn't recognize the cancer cells. And now you have a tumor. And really a tumor is the body's defense mechanism. It's harboring all these bad cells in one place so the rest of the body can still function, right? So I kind of had a fundamental understanding of all this. And so when I started looking at alternative therapies, I really was interested in tackling my immune system. I wanted to see what can I do to get the environment in my body to return back to health. And so that's been my journey. That's the path that I've been on. I left the country for about 12 weeks and did therapies in Mexico. And they were very effective in a lot of ways. It included lots of different things. And, we can get into that if you feel that it's appropriate. But, for the most part, I saw about a 75% reduction in that tumor. So I'm almost there. I'm almost in the clear. So, now I'm kind of stable and I'm pushing through and just kind of giving my body the time it needs to heal. Because I always say, I didn't get cancer in one day, so I can't expect to heal it in one day.
Thank you for that, Chris. Just to add a little spice to this, I'll relay my experience as well. I had been doing the normal cancer screening, the colonoscopies, etc. But when I got a checkup at age 66 with a regular doctor who does that, turns out I had a stage 3B cancer in my bowel. And so we went through the normal procedure. Fortunately, this guy is an exceptional surgeon, and he did laparoscopic surgery, did a grand job. In about a month, I recovered from that, and then it was on to chemo. Well, I'm in New Mexico, and so most of the high end of research and development in cancer is at our University of New Mexico in Albuquerque. That's a couple hours away from me. But nevertheless, I went to them, and I was very impressed with what they had to offer, because it wasn't just about chemo, which they wanted me to do, but it was also about nutrition, genetic screening for predilection to cancer in general and colon cancer in particular, because there's various markers that they would want you to know so the rest of your family can be advised if that's an issue. I started out with pills too. And Chris, I have every sympathy for you. Mine was horrible. After about 6 weeks, I had to quit, and then did the intravenous, and that went much better. But still, it was a 6 to 8 month process for me to do that. And 5 years later, yes, I'm free of it. But I encountered a lot of shock along the way. I don't shock easily, so I think I bore it well and started to learn about cancer, because I tended to want to ignore it. I tended to want to think, hey, generally you're a very healthy person, and I can afford to wait and deal with it when it shows up. Well, that's a very naive approach on my part. But I spent a lot of time banging on the internet, talking to people, talking to other people that have been through colon cancer before, what their experience had been. I got real familiar with survival rates, therapies, and so forth. And I asked a lot of very difficult questions of the oncologists that I interviewed before I underwent therapy. And it was interesting. Some of them had similar attitudes to what you have, is I have this limited tool set It's only the product of 40 to 50 years of intense NIH and statewide and, the larger hospitals concentrated efforts at research and other therapies. And it was, I've got what I've got. It's working better than it used to, but that's also attributed to early screening. So there are so many dimensions on this. The educational part of it for someone who is dealing with it is difficult. And everybody has an opinion, but getting to the authoritative resources is the more difficult. And your doctors don't offer you that. They're not there to train you. They're there to say, well, I have the best, latest, and greatest, and you should just trust me. Well, I don't come from that school of thought, so I was forced to sort of become a pseudo expert on my own about my own issue. So I'm happy to be alive. I'm happy to know I have some years yet to go, and I'm happy to see more things becoming available, which we'll talk about a little bit more in terms of diagnostics and so forth as we go forward. So Catharine, let's circle back to you for a minute. So given all of this, what's your opinion about how each of us individuals should be thinking about our risk of cancer and a good strategy for, being ready for it or ignoring it or mobilizing on it? What does your experience tell us? Because we know you have some deep and long experience there to offer.
Very much so, Jim, very much so. I really initially ignored it, and I should not have, because my mother died of cancer, all her sisters died of cancer, all their daughters have died of breast cancer or ovarian cancer, and her brother, pancreatic cancer, and even on my father's side, 4 of the girls, cancer, my uncle, pancreatic, and his son at a young age of 30, pancreatic. So I had a significant history there. Here I am, a critical care nurse, and I had, got past 50, and here I am at 60. I was 60, and I thought, I got through it. And there it was staring me in the face.
Mm-hmm.
And I can honestly say the biggest problem with this is not even talking to my sisters about it. Not even, because my oldest sister also has breast cancer. My 2 younger ones don't. But the difficult thing is, even when we are looking at it, unless it happens to us, we don't want to deal with it. So I think this is where we really need to step forward in not only our families, but our communities, and make it a comfortable thing to talk about. I'm from 8 children, and my mother would say, okay, ladies, you know what the job is. Today's July 1st, and on the 1st, there's health mandates we must do. And my brothers would think, what the heck? And yet my brother, my parents never talked to them about checking themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And my brother's son at 15, stage 4 testicular cancer. And almost died. He was so sick. And I can honestly say, my brother said to me, why did someone not tell us that the prevalence in our family was this high? And so, you know what? It's about, when you have history of cancer in your family, we need to talk about it and to be acutely aware of what our body is. How does it feel? Well, for me, okay, you feel it on the 1st for the women, but also for the men below the belt. Check on it, and then also men get breast cancer too. Mm-hmm. And of course, that's a stigma. You don't talk about these things, right? And we need to break down those barriers. It's okay to talk about it. It's not a decline in masculinity to do so. And more than that, when you have a history of cancer in your family, to make sure, put the horse before the cart. Develop your lifestyle so that you're doing things that are healthy. Mm-hmm. Diet, exercise, reducing stress, good sleep, hydration. And you know what? When it comes to diet, we need to look at eliminating toxins in our environment, but also be aware of what we're eating. What are you putting in your body?
Right.
In your microbiome, your gut, when you're stressed, all the blood goes to the health, to your head, and to your heart, and to your lungs, and your legs, so you can escape that stress. But you know what? What suffers is your gut and your microbiome, your gut health, because of the decrease of circulation there. You get decreased digestion, decreased circulation to the gut, and absorption. And this, as you know, Chris, I'm sure, profoundly affects the immune system. We have 600 to 800 lymph nodes in our body. 75% of them are in the gut, because this is where you get all the good food and nutrients and all being exchanged, okay? And that is how your immune system gets fed. Your fighter B cells, your fighter T cells, your memory B cells, your memory T cells. So, Chris, I know you're passionate about this too, because your immune system and maintaining a healthy lifestyle and a healthy body. And that also is body, mind, and spirit. It's everything connected. And being committed to taking care of yourself and your children. And to talk to your brothers and sisters about this and that awareness, but also taking that out to the community. I believe these are the things that we must do in order to help everybody, not only yourself, but those around you, so that you're learning and they're aware and they are looking at all these issues proactively.
Right. So prevention and knowledge and openness.
Yes.
Those make a lot of sense. Yes. Chris, you're obviously, with the therapy you received, I think that's a rare thing for someone to say or admit to you, that after a while it's probably not going to be terribly effective. And, you know, I sometimes wonder, okay, we've invested all this time in research. Why is it that something that's like this, that you had caught, does not have better solutions in the traditional medical arena? Now, it's true that medicine, like any other business, and we don't like to think of it as a business, but it is, they invest for the normal curve. The most common cancers are the ones that get the attention. The outliers typically are probably shortchanged in that respect. And maybe that's a reflection of what actually happened with you.
It's possible. You know, first of all, Catherine, what you said was wonderfully stated. I mean, I couldn't agree more. You hit on so many powerful things. You know, to speak to that, Jim, I also think, and this is going to sound a little bit maybe cynical, and I don't mean it to be negative, but I think it's worth saying, is that a lot of times the things that bring the most impact to our health are not able to be sold. They're not patentable. They're not distributable. They're things like getting more fruits and vegetables into your diet, right? No one's going to make a profit off of that, except maybe a farmer, but you know, that's just not the way things are set up. And so a lot of times I think that the Western medicine comes to this saying, well, you know, this is the best we've got, because it is the best they've got, because what they're trying to do is treat something that's natural synthetically. And we've got to treat natural with natural. And I'm not totally against pharmaceuticals. I think there is times and places for them, but I also am not the person that says, I'm going to run straight to that. You have to do your due diligence. You have to research, and you have to say, this is my body and what is best for me. And, you know, what got me into this situation in the first place? And you know, you spoke a lot about genetics and heredity. And one of the things that I would say when it comes to that is, if I see that many people in my family are getting cancer or have gotten cancer throughout a couple of generations, I would also take a look epigenetically and take a step back and say, what are the trends in my family? Do we tend to eat a really bad diet? Do we live in a place that's really toxic? Like, because there's so many factors that we've got to contribute. And see, because I think whenever you just go like, well, my mom got cancer and my grandma got cancer and I'm going to get cancer, then you just become this victim because it's just going to happen to me. But at the same time, I think there are things that we can do to kind of bust out of that matrix, if you will, and I know that it's a sensitive topic because I'm not trying to guilt or shame anyone, but I know in my case and with many people that I've worked with, we can look back, and if we take an honest look, we can say, this is most likely my fault because I've made some choices that weren't best for my health. I know for me, and speaking to what you were saying, Catherine, my diet was a trash can before I got cancer. I mean, I was just like the standard American diet, which is sad, pun intended. And I was eating fast food all the time, going out to eat, very rarely ate fruits or vegetables, was literally eating like highly processed food all of the time. And I was creating an acidic environment for myself. And then I was at a job that was highly stressful. I was working about 60 to 80 hours a week. I created this breeding ground for disease. And then, so I can't look back and just say like, oh, well, oh my gosh, this just happened. I can't believe, how did it happen to me? Well, I know exactly how it happened to me. I didn't take care of myself, and you go, well, you had skin cancer. It happened because you got a sunburn. Listen, cancer is cancer. Cancer is the process is the same throughout the body. Now it affects in different ways because our organs and our systems are more susceptible to damage or whatever the case may be. But there is way more research out there that shows that sunscreen and diet cause skin cancer far before the sun does. Okay. And actually the sun is the only source of vitamin D that we have. It's really the thing that fights cancer. So we just have to start to wake up to realize that we're not victims in all of this, and we've got to educate ourselves and we've got to take control. So,
right. Thank you. One of the things I want to cover on behalf of the audience is a couple of issues in addition. One is diagnostics. The cancer people will tell you earlier is better. And nowadays, even in the 40s, it's not unusual, or maybe in the 30s, to start doing that. It looks like in the colon cancer arena, they walked back the age from, the late 50s into, the early 50s, and probably we're in the 40s now. So one is early diagnostics. Okay, so you two have talked about prevention, which I can't help but agree with. I had to go through nutritional counseling and genetic screening myself. And I probably have a little bit of what you both said, is I wasn't eating optimally or resourcing enough nutrients optimally to have a good preventative track record. So you're probably right, Chris. I probably own a good bit of that responsibility. And yes, there were not a lot, but there were instances of cancer in my family as well. But one of the things that I think, we need to say, when we look to the cancer establishments, hospitals, research hospitals, people that provide oncology and so forth, and surgery, is we want to be able to trust them. And I think trending that, we need to familiarize the audience with, okay, what are the components of that I need to be aware of? One is early screening. One is it takes a long time for one screening to get from the theoretical and practical to be a production-worthy capability. For instance, there are camera pills for GI monitoring for colon cancer. They were available when I had colon cancer. Have I ever had one? No. So going from a therapy that is available, or a diagnostic that's available, to actually having it available to the public seems to lag the problem. There is a CEA blood test, which looks for antigens that are markers for cancer. I had never had one until I got cancer. Never. There are things about genetic screening for cancer. So when Catharine here mentions a whole family history of it, one of the jump to things in my logical mind is, well, why don't I get genetically screened for a predilection for cancer and see if I have that, and if there's anything besides just healthy practice that I can do, well, then I'm willing to do it. And then there's other new therapies coming on that aren't yet mainstream, where you're doing targeted immunotherapy, because each of our body chemistries is entirely different. So, and most research aims for the middle of the normal curve, out to 2 to 3 sigma. So they're trying to catch most of it, but the outliers frequently are not catchable that way. Whereas targeted genetic immunology actually is about a specific individual. So one is what's available. And I think the message I would want to put to our audience is, number one is it's changing, but you need to ask those questions about what should I be doing? If I have cancer in my family, I should be talking to my doctor about what kind of risk I'm facing. What can I do now proactively? It seems to me that also having therapies, the next question is, okay, so assume I finally get it, and it might be this, what would I be facing in terms of therapies? What's coming along the line? So those are questions I think the audience needs to feel comfortable about asking their doctors, comfortable spending time, say, on Catharine's podcast or your podcast about your different approaches and information you have to share with them that's not generally available, particularly when you have the cancer new and you're under the gun and you're very emotional and it's difficult to internalize that information. So I offer that question to the two of you for comment also, please.
Jim, one thing I would say to that, I do agree on a lot of levels. One thing to make note of is, according to the National Cancer Institute, they report that only 5 to 10% of all cancers are genetic.
Right.
That the other 90% are environmental. So I think when it comes to early screening, early detection, I mean, sure, I think with wisdom, if you're starting to, if maybe you have that history in your family or whatever, there's nothing wrong with that. But I think we can do a lot of personal screening. Okay. Like evaluate. I love what you said, Catherine, like at the first of every month, like take a check. You know what I'm saying? Like if all I'm doing is eating processed food, go ahead and put yourself on the list.
Yeah.
You're going to develop a disease at some point. I mean, I know that sounds very negative, but it's very true, because you're eating chemicals. You're not eating food. Okay. And your body can only take it for so long. And so I think we can kind of take personal inventory, and that can bring a lot of peace of mind, and I do agree with you. There are early warning signs. I had skin cancer. I had the early warning signs. And just like you, I was just the standard, American male. This will go away. I'm not going to, this is no big deal. And I'm tough, and it got worse, and so I ignored it. But I ignored the spot of skin cancer that I had for 7 years. And then after 7 years, it just took off. Okay. So yeah, there are that was a visual indicator, right? The reason that I caught what was going on in my neck so quick is because I started having a lot of pain and inflammation. Inflammation in your body is your body telling you something's not right with me. Okay. So being aware, and I think if we can advocate and educate people to be aware, to be in tune with their bodies and understand, like, pain is not normal. There's some people, my back just always hurts. That's the way I live. No, that means there's something wrong with you, and you have to be bold to say, like, I'm going to take control of my health, and I'm not going to just let life happen to me. Like, I'm going to create a life that's what it needs to be. So I hope that speaks to your question, where I am.
I hear you.
Well, and just to add a little bit more to that, let's look at the World Health Organization, the Canadian Cancer Society, and the American Cancer Society. They all agree on one thing, that 80% of chronic disease today, and that includes cancers, is related to your lifestyle habits. The biggest one being our diet.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here I am, a critical care nurse for 25 years, bilateral knee replacements, 250 pounds I looked after everyone else, but I never looked after myself. Looked after my kids, the husband, the community, but I didn't look after myself. And it wasn't until I got cancer that I had made that commitment to go along and say, okay, I need to just do something about changing me.
Right.
And you have to have the courage and take the chance and commit to making changes that are going to last a lifetime and make it happen. Choose to change. Choose to change. And those are my 5 C's, by the way. But you know what? The thing is that when you have high risk in your family, or you even notice any little change, you need to be proactive and do something about it. Because even if there's a 2, 3, 4, 6 month delay by the time you notice something, and then you go to the doctor and you go to the specialist, because that's how long the process is right now because of the driving need for medical care. But I also want to say that it is early detection. And this is choice to know yourself first, know you're normal, so that when things are off, you do immediately respond. And I think one of the things that I like to speak about often is there's something called the ATF3 master switch. Now that master switch in the presence of stress turns on the oncogene. And have you noticed there's this huge upswing in work-life balance? And I think a lot of that was due to that discovery of these master switches they're starting to look at. And even though we're spending millions and trillions of dollars on research, you're thinking, well, there's so much cancer. What's the purpose of all this research if we don't have answers? And it's always the same thing. Do your screening and go do your mammograms and do your PSAs and do all these things, guys, check yourself down there. But the thing is that we have to be also aware of the presence of stress in our life and diet. And we have these things called happy hormones. And those happy hormones are things, what do you need to do to establish lifestyle changes that are going to reduce those risks of stress and also help you in your diet and in your planning? Because I can tell you right now, I'm now 180 pounds. And bringing it down, but it's been because I've made changes to my diet and exercise, and I'm yoga and deep breathing and meditation and qigong and all these wonderful things that are out there. There are lots of things that we can do to reduce stress, but to more importantly, change our diet. But we have to choose to change. Just like you choose love is a decision, so is choosing to change and to make those lifestyle changes. And it is not easy. And that's the role of a cancer coach, really, is to step forward and help people find out who they are, what they like to do, and then help guide them to make those changes. I can't tell them what changes to make. They have to research and they have to be proactive in wanting to take charge and take control of their lives.
Right.
And I think these are the hardest things that we have to face. And it's when you're faced with cancer and you're inundated with information, it's having to you need, and I like to say a professional cancer coach. Okay. It's like someone who has a degree, someone who's educated enough to send you to the right sources and not to Google, because Google does not have the best answers. And I can honestly say we have to really look at and be self-discerning to really investigate. When I was diagnosed with stage 1, they caught it early because of genetics, by the way, because my sister said she was in BC and I'm in Ontario, and the genetics there, talked to the genetics counselor over here and said, why don't you follow up on all those girls and see what's going on? And I'm the one advocating for my care, insisted that they do an MRI with contrast to determine if there's anything. I want to know what my baseline was on the breast. And they found it. And yet it had not been found on a mammogram. So it really does. It's important to advocate for your care and with confidence. And so that is why we look at cancer coaches and can bring them in early, because you're still going to come out after all this and still come out of all your treatment and be immune suppressed because of chemo and radiation, anything else you choose. Right. And there's a lot of drugs out there. And even when we're doing things holistically, we're putting strange things in our bodies. And when something, I was stage 1 and they decided not to give me radiation and chemo because, they said, remove the breast, 98% chance you'll never have to deal with it again. Guess what? It's called recurrence, even though I've done all this. Mm-hmm. But I have the peace of mind of knowing that I actively made changes and I'm doing my best to prevent and reduce those risks. Right. But even if you do get them, now I'm looking at, okay, what can I do now that I have the education as a cancer coach to really take a look, like mistletoe, vitamin C, IV. There are lots of really nice resources and things out there that we can do to augment any other treatment we get. I'm not saying it should just be what they're offering, because we need to look at everything in a combination of things that work best for us. Because we're going to be told, do this because the hospital wants their money. But we also have to look at, well, how can we augment every aspect of our care? And I really say there are other things we can do, to going for walks in nature, right, socializing, finding joy and happiness in your life. These are the kind of things, love the life you live, love the life you lead. And that body, mind, spirit connection, for that you get peace. You need the joy and happiness in life so that you can feel good, because medicine is just 1/3. The other third is changing your lifestyle. And the other one is finding that love and laughter and joy and just living and managing that stress and getting out there and finding peace in your life and finding peace with yourself. And you know what? When you find that and love yourself, you're going to be able to help others. And that's one of my big messages too.
Chris, let's pop back to you for a minute. You've got a new podcast and the Plant Adventure Initiative. Could you acquaint the audience with that and also tell them how to reach that podcast, if you would?
Sure, absolutely. So the Plant Adventure is kind of my brand in the world of health and wellness, as far as helping people nutritionally. I'm a functional nutritionist, and so I love to help people use food to make a better environment for their bodies. It's not just, hey, I'm hungry, let's go eat. It's everything that we're putting into our body, kind of like what we've been talking about today. It's going to make a difference in our body. And so about being strategic, and that looks different for different people. And so it's important to sit down and evaluate. Every person's diet needs to be different. It needs to be conducive to their lifestyle, their environment, and everything. I take all of that, a very holistic approach to that. So, I do some nutritional coaching. Also, on the Plant Adventure, I also have a YouTube channel associated with that where I share recipes. I cook and eat primarily plant-based. And so I try to make that fun for people, because a lot of people are scared of cooking plants. I don't know why, but they're like, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, there's lots to do, that you can have so much fun in the kitchen. So, kind of giving families ideas about, how to incorporate healthy foods into the daily lifestyle and raising healthy kids. That's really my goal with that. Also, as you had mentioned, and you can find that at theplantadventure.com, www.theplantadventure.com. It's also on YouTube by the same name and social media. And then recently, a couple of months ago, I launched a podcast called Healing Conspiracy. And the idea behind that is that we dive into the world of alternative health, and we it's really not about finding answers as much as it is asking right questions. And so we really go in and we tackle a lot of these topics like we're talking about today. We tackle not only nutritional topics, we tackle alternative therapies. And I love to highlight people who have overcome the odds and they've healed and they've maybe gone against the conventional treatment. And we love to hear those stories. So I would love for you to tune into that. It's at www.healingconspiracy.com. It can also be found on any podcast platform as well as YouTube at Healing Conspiracy and on KFred Radio. So there's lots of ways to connect there. And, if you have a story of overcoming that you'd like to share or a topic you'd want to hear, I'm all ears. So I would love for people to engage that way.
Great. Catharine, you have a podcast also. Maybe you want to tell us about that.
Do you know what? I've just started doing little excerpts in my, and sometimes just these little 30-minute mini ones too. And a lot of them are just on tips on health, tips on lifestyle habits, things like that. But I wanted just to comment, Chris, it really does come down to diet. Really, in all honesty, eat at home. Yes, plant-based. Now I do have fish and chip and fish and chicken, but every other day because my husband and my kids, oh my God, you're giving us this healthy shit. And the thing is that, so I've got them every other day eating, a plant-based diet. Okay. And a lot, as you said, it is, people don't know how to cook vegetables, like steaming them and baking. We should not be looking at going out to restaurants and getting all the high fat, high sugar. We don't know what additives are in them. And we can control our diets by cooking at home. It doesn't have to be hard. It's not difficult. But this is where, and Chris, this is where people in nutrition need to come forward and need to be out there in the community and voicing about diet. And I don't mean a diet isn't, keto or this or that. It's about eating healthy. The benefits of mushrooms and garlic or, these kind of things. Just talking about some of those, what's in our food and what's good about different things, how to even cook or how to preserve. We're coming into winter. So how do we store the goodness of our vegetables and fruit so that we can take advantage of it in the summer, in the winter, not just eat them in the summer. I really think we need to look at what you're eating and it's what you have in your house. And there's some really good books out there too. Look at the China study. There are tons of books also on just how to eat plant-based diets, or what are some of those good recipe books where you're using more plant-based. Just start. You're never too late to start. It doesn't matter if you're 20, if you're 80. It's never too late to start focusing on making those changes in your life. And this is important. Start with your diet, start with exercise, start with decreased stress, and find what works for you, not what works for me, what works for you.
Okay. Thank you for that. Well, we're coming to the end of our time, and what I'd like to remind our audience here is what we're summarizing here is you have a choice. You have the ability to actually help yourself now and improve your odds, but you can be in control of the cancer process if it's your unfortunate circumstance that you're going to have to deal with it. And it's an educational process that you can engage when you are demanded to engage, when you're in the middle of it, or you can anticipate that and have some familiarity with it. We've talked about 2 websites here. Again, I'll reiterate the Cancer Care Roundup with Catharine here, and the Healing Conspiracy podcast with Chris Pratt can get you help you get you started on the preventative side. So I highly recommend you take that proactive approach. And our objective here at the Lifelong Fulfillment Initiative is to make sure you're armed with the knowledge that you can take some control over your life. And this happens to be one of them. There's other speed bumps to be addressed later with our podcast, which we'll touch on as well. It's unfortunate, but that's a part of life. Thank you both so much for coming in today. I love your insights, and I hope the audience has a chance to connect with your podcast and learn more. Thanks again. Look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you.
Jim.
Bye, Chris. Bye, Catherine. So thanks again to our guests today, Catharine Jansen and Chris Pratt. It was a very difficult subject to entertain, but one we wanted to share with you. And thank you for attending today on Vision in Action Live. We really hope you found it helpful. Vision in Action Live podcasts are interviews with subject matter experts and people leading self-directed lives so that you can see what others can accomplish. Check out the newsletters, podcasts, and extensive reference materials at lifelongfulfillment.com. It's all free to you. You can also find us on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, your favorite podcast channel, and KFRED Internet Radio. I'm Jim Boswell, your host. You can reach me with questions about this podcast at jim@lifelongfulfillment.com. Until next time, think about empowering yourself further with resilience. We'll talk about that later. Have a great one.